Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2021. I was going to say back to the podcast, but we are kicking off 2021 with Aaron. I'm pointing like anybody would know which way Seattle is from my house, with the man up to the northwest. It is, it's 2021. We are going in, we were just talking, we're going in optimistic, we're going positive. It's going to be a good year. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, not bad. Our family's been talking about 2020, and we stayed healthy. Most of the people around us are generally healthy, a few
Hmm.
exceptions. Those who've had COVID-19 fared okay.
Yeah.
I know that's not true for a lot of people, but I'm trying to be optimistic and show some gratitude and all that, but hopeful for things to stay on the track they're on and really get the rest of the way there.
Yep.
But we're doing okay. The year's off to an okay start.
I would say it's off to an okay start unless you're Microsoft and you're trying to keep Windows 10X a secret. Look at that transition. That's a full silver dollar transition right there.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that. And you've seen the video, yeah, where they installed it on a Surface Pro 7.
Yes.
That's pretty juicy.
It's
Um,
have you played with it? I may or may not have installed it myself. But have you touched this thing at all yet?
haven't just seen the video and
Yeah.
screenshots. Haven't ventured out for a handful of reasons.
Sure.
Again, partly because of our over under that it's probably is already getting watered down for sure, as
Hmm.
we've confirmed. And that, for that reason, I don't know how much I would be using it, although I probably should inform myself and get sort of conversant about this more, I guess. Maybe it's time to commit some cycles and start tearing it apart. But I gotta say, from the video, it sure looks a ton like Chrome OS.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna
a
say
ton.
what you see is what you get. Like
Yeah, right.
there's not a lot hidden under the covers, which is it feels just like this really simple OS, and unfortunately, getting under the covers is what all of us need to do because anybody can we can look at it, poke around, and click and say, oh, there's no context menu and there's none of that stuff. But what did they truly remove, and what can and cannot 10x do? I think is a huge
Yes,
question.
right. I mean, I'm not even sure that can you get to Task Manager? Like that's one of the first things I'd look out
Yeah.
at is like, okay, just start peeling back a little bit here, a little bit there, and seeing, what's happening, and how much like Windows that I know of is there,
Hmm.
or not, right? I mean, and that's part of it. To your point, it's just what's there and not much is presented, at least
Yeah.
in the video that was leaked, or I guess not leaked. It was very not sly that they
Yeah.
released this thing. And so I would recommend that listeners go and take a look. It's short, but just a very basic demo, and it seems to move along pretty well on this Surface Pro 7. So I
Yeah.
mean,
I
they
mean,
got it to work, and I think it was just a handful of registry hacks and a few things just to get a few drivers to work. And for the most part, it does.
hmm
And pretty fluidly. Like it seems like the performance is there, albeit on a wildly overpowered computer.
yeah.
That's the other thing is that what you're seeing is Windows 10X on a device that is designed to run something much, much bigger and heavier duty. So
Yep.
it'd be like putting the motor of an F-350 into the um, body and chassis of like a Honda Civic or
Hmm.
something, right? Of course, the Honda Civic is going
Yep.
to go like crazy. It may not go very long, but it's going to be pretty impressive while it goes, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and I think
Exactly.
that's what we're seeing there, and that's good. It's cool. It's fine. But man, this is clearly a direct attack on Google and
Yeah.
Chromebooks, right? Because Windows 10X isn't going to ship independent of a device,
Right.
right? I mean,
At least as
you
we
can't
know
just
it
go get Windows
today.
10.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Uh,
and which is identical to the Google model as
yep.
well, right? So I mean, here we are. I don't know, sort of interesting.
The crazy thing about it is getting over. Probably much like yourself. I'm a big right mouse click user, right? Big context menus, and like that
Yes.
just doesn't exist. Like you click and nothing happens. On the desktop, the only thing you can do is like change wallpaper. Like it's simple. Like that is the best
Yeah,
way to
I'm
describe it.
I'm used to that, but we're sort of this generation where that is how our computing universe,
Yeah,
dude,
that's a
that's
fair
where it came
point.
from. That's how it evolved. And I don't know if younger people like my daughter
Mm,
who's, in high school, if she sort of plays that way or not really. She's very comfortable moving between operating systems, iOS to
hmm.
Mac OS to Windows. She's very fluid and very practical that way. But I don't know how far she goes into the operating system to really do the things that people like you and I do,
Yeah.
where we're moving 100 miles an hour and we know the quickest way to get there. And I
Hmm.
suppose you do that as a professional. Like everybody figures that out, maybe not. I
Hopefully,
don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm getting
It sort
jaded
of
in this.
ties exactly what you're saying ties really interesting into what actually Microsoft did officially announce this week, part of an education conference that happens every year early, or I should say mid-January, or a string or a series of new low-cost PCs starting at $185 all the way up to, they're saying, a $329. I mean, these are entry-level education-focused machines, none of which are running 10x, at least because they're not talking about it yet. But it wouldn't surprise me if that kind of comes down the pipeline for these things.
Yeah, so what's the strategy? Okay, so clearly, again, going directly at Chromebook. Chromebook has done better probably than everyone thought.
Hmm.
Um, my son had a Chromebook and then they gave him a fancy new HP that also is a Chromebook. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay, he's gonna get upgraded to a real computer. No, it's just a fancier Chromebook with, a better camera, better mic, better pointing device, but integrated mouse and the whole thing. Um, so I think clearly we're seeing Microsoft drive hard on the Google compete angle, the Chromebook compete angle, and I would also submit they are pushing hard against the legacy Apple kind of education dominance.
Yeah.
Right? Remember of old, like even
Hmm.
when like you and I were probably in
Yeah.
lower grade schools, it was all Apple all the time. And I think that was for a lot of reasons,
Hmm.
but no doubt a decisive push on Apple's part to make it affordable for schools to get these things so that when you emerge into the, professional world, you want to use that type of device and that form factor and that operating system, have that user experience. So I think this is Microsoft trying to say, no, 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 no. We want everyone to come out really comfortable and confident with this user experience and this device form factor and a two-button mouse and all the things, and especially to keep the competition at bay, which now as the conversations evolved here is goes beyond Google to Apple as well.
It's you brought up some very old neurons made some connections in my brain when you were talking about Apple and education because it tangibly relates to my daughter what she's learning now, but I could say with a high degree of confidence that I learned my times tables in school because I wanted to play Oregon Trail on whatever
Dude.
Mac it was we had in the classroom. Because whoever, it was, you finish your times tables and then you could go like free choice or whatever they called it back then. And I would
Yes.
always pick the computer. And if I wanted to pick it, I had to be the first one done. And so that was my motivation to learn those times tables was Oregon Trail on an Apple II or whatever we were
It
using
was
back
it was
then.
probably a 2E. I remember
Yeah.
playing Oregon Trail, and it was on a 2E. There was one in our
Hmm.
classroom. There at that point there weren't really computer labs. There
Yep.
weren't networks. I mean, technically the internet existed, but the web didn't exist, and so on and so forth. So it was still sort of very, very early kind of telnet style days. At best, if you even had a modem, which didn't really exist, that was
Hmm.
very rarefied territory. So we were thinking about this very monolithic, isolated style of computing that was just merely for personal productivity, more or less to help us do calculations quickly and then print things,
Hmm.
without a typewriter.
Yep.
So yes, you're exactly right in that this is the same model in a way repeating here, right? That how do we make it so that people are, what is the Oregon Trail of today? Is it Minecraft that people want to run
Oh
to their
yeah.
PC and play whatever
Hmm.
whatever collection of games or whatever their happy free time is? But importantly, it is, we are in this new thing, and they talk of pandemic and remote learning and this becoming the alternative to the snow day. Like
Yeah.
that kind of breaks my heart. I think,
Yes.
did we talk about this last
A
time? Like
little bit. I mean,
heart
it's
aches about not having snow days
yeah.
anymore, but I think that's a reality. And so the device needs to follow if that's the case, and maybe it's a good thing, fine. I mean, in education, they've got plenty of time off. Everyone, like, there's constant vacations, right? They barely
Yeah.
got back to school. They've had days off, and teachers have in-service days, so students have plenty of mental health time. The occasional surprise day off is super nice too, but
Hmm.
if we're going to have this thing where it moves fluidly between remote learning and in-person learning, then we better have well-equipped systems. And interestingly, in that same discussion, the number of 4G, 5G, LTE equipped devices is
Hmm.
also really interesting, where we're not thinking in terms of Wi-Fi or much less a wired network. We're thinking about going straight to
Yeah.
a cell network. That's sort of an interesting step in evolution.
Yeah, it really is. It's when you were saying that, I was thinking, what's the name of the Starlink, right? That's coming.
Starlink, oh
Uh,
man.
like that's a whole different conversation, but it's all again about getting that basic connectivity down just through a different mechanism. And again, it's not going to be long. You could even make this argument today, but like someone like my child who's 7, she will never really understand the world of without connected devices. Like, what do you mean I can't just take my laptop to the park and connect to the internet?
Yeah, my son's a couple years older, but he's very much in the same boat. And my daughter, for that matter, who's again in high school. And the Starlink thing is super fascinating because they're doing that here. So those
Hmm.
engineers, and they're assembling those little, they're like the size of a Rubik's cube, is my understanding. Those little satellites
Oh
is what
yeah,
they
like
are.
the CubeSats they're chucking up there. Yep.
Unbelievable strategy. And what that's going to do is just crazy. So think about all these places that we go in the world where we get disconnected,
Hmm.
national parks, or
Yep.
just on my ski adventures into literally into the wilderness. Like,
Hmm.
part of the joy is not being connected. Well, in a way, it sure would be nice to get help if you needed it.
Sure.
And if you've got, even a basic, kind of low end solar
Mm.
charging capability, you would have connectivity anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
except kind of under a cliff or something where you couldn't get a satellite signal. But your ability to kind of walk around and get connected in the most wild, remote points of Earth, it's just mind blowing,
Yeah.
truly.
It really is, not to pivot away or pivot back to like that was sort of a little bit of a but it's a
Yeah,
really
sorry.
no,
Got a
it's a
little excited.
fascinating one because I was thinking about too, like when you're crossing the ocean, right?
Yeah, it's
It's going to be a trivial task now to connect to the internet. It's not going to be expensive like it with sat phones and all that stuff.
right. Would it work through an airplane? That could change everything too. If you're not doing the whatever the GoGo,
Yeah,
is that the internet provider on airplanes? I don't even remember. It's been
it's
so
been
long
so
since I've
long. Yeah.
flown, but yeah, it's just it's wild. Absolutely. But yes, so education, always connected, good video, never a snow day on these incredibly inexpensive
Hmm.
devices. Then you go into college and you're choosing a higher powered device because you're going to be starting to do work for real, and maybe you're starting to head into an engineering path or a design path or an architecture path where you got to have more compute power and you're using bigger, higher powered apps. Well, my device of choice is this.
Hmm.
One of our designers is a, they're notoriously Mac people. Well, he's a
Yep.
PC person, right? So
Hmm.
he just gets higher end, fancier, nicer stuff potentially, rather than, the really
Sure.
expensive, rarefied universe of the Mac.
Yep.
So kind of an interesting strategy.
It is. Speaking of strategies, we got a question in this week, and it's not something I don't think we've talked too much about. The question comes in and says, "Hi, Brad and Aaron. I wanted to get your feedback about driver maintenance. I know you talk a lot about Windows updates breaking things, but I have a much harder time with driver updates breaking things like docks and external machinery. Do you have any advice or general feedback about how to approach this topic?"
That's a great question. So the reason that you and I are always talking about this stuff is because we're always talking about what's going on with Windows and how
Hmm.
often Windows updates break things. So, if this listener has these problems, first of all, you're not alone. And really my own experience is more like that,
Hmm.
where a manufacturer releases a driver update, and then the device doesn't work anymore from Windows, and you're like, what the heck just happened? Right? And it was their update. It wasn't even Windows breaking things so that now the manufacturer has to rewrite their driver, and then you have to do this rodeo. So this is sort of an interesting and very relevant, but slightly different scenario than what you and I usually talk about. The reason that this is interesting to me as well, of course, is that Smart Deploy, our product, it handles this problem in a unique way. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, what's unique about Smart Deploy and the way it works is it injects the drivers at a sort of a unique process, right? And this is part of our magic sauce, is that we do it basically the opposite of the way that Microsoft does it, and kind of prevailing other providers, different way that Symantec does it, different way that Tivoli does it. And as a result, our process is quite a bit more reliable. That doesn't mean it's infallible. And it also doesn't mean that the manufacturer can't make a change and give you something that breaks things. So for no fault of our own, these things break, or that Windows changes things and now you're forced to make these updates. Or Windows changes things, the manufacturer has to then change their things, and then it's back to you to make all these updates. So it can be quite a wild round trip. And this is sort of the crux of the IT problem related to managing Windows, as far as managing devices. If your manufacturer makes a bad driver, it's sort of a challenge. If you're dealing with like a one-off thing, if this is at home and you're connected to something, whatever, you're a 3D printer or something like that, I guess you wouldn't really do it that way these days, but you have to kind of just troubleshoot and then find the old driver and reinstall it or something. If this is a work thing and you've got a network of 500, 5,000, 50,000 devices that you're managing, some part of, you have to take a little bit of a different strategic approach. First of all, test. I mean, hopefully you've got a lab or an environment, or even just some old kind of junky devices, or broken devices. Maybe the integrated printer doesn't work, and then it's out of warranty or something, but you can still use it as a test device. That's kind of what we do. And see if these things are going to break, because generally they do, especially if you're using them at scale. The problem enters these environments where you're in manufacturing or you're in healthcare, and you've got that one PC that's serving that one, whatever, $1.5 million digital imaging device or whatever it is. And then they give you a driver for that, and then that breaks, and it's back to IT to figure it out. And yes, you're managing 500 devices, but you're stuck with just that one device connected to that one unusual, super expensive machine that you rely on to generate a lot of money. And this is where the pain really enters. So I would do one of two things. One, be sure you have a copy of the old driver around so you can roll back. Be sure that you've got a good system image. And so maybe I would do it that way. I would keep your old system image, and if you do it our way or if you do it anyone else's way, you either keep all of those drivers around so you can have them installed properly, or keep what we call platform packs around that go with that. And so you can absolutely, if things get sideways, go back in, flatten, reload everything back to a known good state. And then you'll be okay. That's sort of your parachute if things go horribly wrong. But the sort of the caveman way is just to keep an old driver and reinstall the old one.
There you go.
That's the using your screwdriver as a chisel kind of tactic. And if things go horribly wrong.
I like that analogy, screwdriver as a chisel, because
we do that sometimes in IT, don't we, Brad? I mean, sometimes it's about just returning to productivity. You're amassing sort of this technical debt, so to speak, right? From a traditional IT perspective. Sometimes those things don't get fixed, but man, it's amazing how long some of those well-made screwdrivers last and how well they work as chisels.
It really is. I've got one that the whole end is just beat up from exactly that. You just grab the hammer and just make it work. Here's sort of a tangibly related question to making it work, Aaron. You just experienced one heck of a windstorm, actually, didn't you? How
Oh man.
how was
Yeah,
how
so
was
it sort
that?
of came out of nowhere, and the craziest thing we had a lot of power outage,
Yeah.
obviously hundreds of thousands of people without power for a while. We are fortunate that we're close to some public facilities,
Okay.
schools, which are
Yep.
of course are closed still because of the pandemic, but they need to have power.
Hmm.
They're still serving lunch, yeah, for people who need it, and we're close to the library, so we often get power back quicker. The next street over didn't have power for 4 days.
Oh.
And so this reminded me of my friends and colleagues in Iowa who had a similar windstorm, and a lot of them lost power for a long time.
Hmm.
Not all that unusual for us to lose power, but man, it's amazing how quickly you get knocked back into sort
Sure.
of simpler times, and how much you realize how much the world relies on electricity. And it's also really fascinating. Listeners, take a second. If you're in your car or at your desk, stop typing. Take your hand off your mouse and
Hmm.
think about that there is no computer technology without electricity. Zero, right? You
Yep.
you have a UPS, great. You're good for maybe if some hours on
Hmm.
that. What happens the second or third or fourth day? You've got a generator. You're either running on diesel or natural gas. You know, the this is a very weak layer if you want to think about it that way.
Yep.
A snow metaphor of how avalanches happen. You've got a real weak layer here, and if that goes, the party's over. And so it's just sort of an interesting reminder of the chore of IT and how important some of these things are. We spend a lot of time talking about security and stability and all
Hmm.
those things. And it really is just a good reminder of some of these very, very basic ingredients that are required in order to do what we do. I don't know.
To do what we do, I think is a an appropriate way to think about this podcast. It's we do what we do, but that kind of wraps it up quaintly, if you will. It's a humbling thought to think that we think about redundant internet, redundant drives, redundant everything. Electricity is quite a bit harder to do.
Yeah. How prepared are you? That's something to think about. And what are your risks? So,
Hmm.
going beyond sort of, the security discussion, and are we going to get hacked, and are people managing passwords effectively, all of that. Take one step back, think about your, disaster readiness plan, all these things that you have. And yeah, you're checking the boxes, but really, when's the last time you fired up the generator? When's the
Yeah.
last time you refreshed your diesel fuel supply? When's the last time you tested your UPSs? All those things. When's the last time you verified the alerts coming from, if you still run an on-prem data center,
Hmm.
no matter how small, right? If you have any production workloads on-prem, when's the last time you verified that your temperature sensor is going to send you a notification to your phone properly that the server room's getting hot?
Yep.
All those things turn into this mess that, if left unchecked, one point of failure becomes many points of failure, and your job just multiplied, and you have a major crisis. So often in IT, we are the saviors
Hmm.
who are completely unrecognized, and our work is best done
Yeah.
in the 45 minutes before people show up at work. And so there is no crisis.
Yep.
Nobody even knows. It could have been a disaster, and so many people so frustrated. But that extra 30 minutes that you took to get into work before everyone showed up, to whatever, fix a connection, fix the VPN, whatever. How often does that happen, and what does it take to pull the rug out from underneath you? That might be a good mantra. This might be a topic worth coming back to
Yeah, I
this
was
year.
just thinking that too. We can't have all the fun in one episode, so we will leave it with that. And I think that'll be a good segue for later discussions. But Aaron, we very much appreciate you taking your time. It's been a good
Cheers.
chat. hopefully we addressed the driver question. If we didn't, make sure to email us because we're happy to answer
Any
questions.
clarification, for sure.
I mean, questions are what help keep this podcast moving forward. And so as we move forward to 2021, we'll catch all of you right back here next time.